Okay, so good afternoon, guys. Welcome to week 7 of KodeCamp 4.0 Bootcamp. Yeah, my name is Gage Kretschmer, as you all know. So we'll just continue from where we stopped. But today we're going to be looking at CI/CD in Flutter. Yeah, some persons who feel like, do we need CI/CD, or maybe what is CI/CD, right? Yeah, actually, as a Flutter developer, you actually need this knowledge. You need to understand what CI/CD is, and of course, how to implement it as a developer. But of course, we're looking at it from a Flutter perspective. Okay, so CI/CD stands for continuous integration and continuous deployment. Okay, stands for continuous integration and continuous deployment rather. Okay, so it's just a set of practices and tools that we use in software development to automate the process of building, the process of testing, and the process of deploying applications. Okay, and it's necessary because it helps to increase efficiency, to reduce errors, and to ensure that there's consistent quality right throughout the development life cycle. So in the context of Flutter, right, CI/CD now for Flutter applications just has to do with automating the build, automating the tests, and the deployment processes specifically for Flutter projects, right? Um, so looking at this image, right, you can actually see there's what we call a CI/CD pipeline, right? So we have continuous integration, continuous delivery. So the CI, which is continuous integration, can be defined here as build and test, right? It belongs to this category. Now the CD belongs to the category where you release. So you're building, you build, and then write your codes, you test, and then you release, and then operations, and then monitoring. So this falls under what continuous delivery. Okay. So let's move on. So what is a CI/CD pipeline, right? So a CI/CD pipeline is just a set of automated processes and tools that enables developers to integrate code changes, okay, to test them and to deploy the application consistently and efficiently. So it's a continuous process, right? And there's consistency, there's no time where it is not working and it's working, it's efficient. So in the context of our Flutter projects, our CI/CD pipeline now helps us to streamline the development workflow, that you're automating your build and your test processes, and of course, ensuring your deployment is smooth. Okay. So that's basically what a CI/CD pipeline is, just a set of automated processes and tools. Okay. Now, so this is just an image, right? That kind of just gives us that. So I got this from Cookable Labs, rather. So, for example, right, you create a new branch, right, and you do what you need to do. You push code changes. Now we go into the continuous integration part, where there's an automated build and test, right? You push your code, push whatever code fixes that is available. This is a continuous cycle, right? And we have the automated build and test again, because you have actually done a build, a test, you've pushed it, right? Whatever fixes, it actually goes through a build and test again, and then there's a review process. Okay, so you can deploy the review application, right? So of course, we have a dev site and a live site. You don't push things straight towards production. You have a test site or something, right? So this is just a review application. You can be deployed there. So after review and approval, right, then those changes are now merged, And then comes the continuous deployment, where we have an automated build. You still do a test again and then deploy it to production for the end users. Okay, so this is just the whole concept of continuous integration and continuous deployment, in a nutshell. So let's pick them one by one, right? So starting with continuous integration, which is the CI. So basically what this does is that it regularly merges code changes from multiple developers into a shared repository. Now, of course, even as a single developer, it can do that, right? So, but it regularly merges code changes from multiple developers into a shared repository. And it involves committing the code changes to a VCS, a version control system, being Git or maybe Bitbucket, okay, for your Flutter project. So whenever a developer completes a task or adds a feature or makes a change, do a fix, right, it commits the code changes to a VCS, right? So that's the automatic continuous integration, okay? So the CI, continuous integration, it has its pipeline. So the CI pipeline for Flutter projects, okay, typically involves a few steps. Now, the first step is the code integration, right? Where you as the developer, you push some code changes, some changes to the repository, maybe Git, right? Which will trigger a continuous integration system, which we're going to look at various types of, right? So it's to trigger a CI system, right? So that's one step, code integration. We have the building, right? Where your CI system will pull the latest code, install the necessary dependencies, and then build the application. And then we have the next step, which is automated testing, where your CI system will run some automated tests. Okay, sorry about that. Confirm you can hear me.
I can hear you now.
Yes, I can.
Okay, sorry. Where did you lose me? Maybe probably just take a step back. Okay, let me just take a step back, right? So I was talking about the continuous integration, right? And the fact that it regularly merges code changes from, the multiple developers into a particular repository, shared repository. And then we're looking at the CI pipeline for Flutter projects, talking about code integration, where a developer pushes some code changes to the repository, then which will trigger a CI system. We'll look at the various CI systems that are available. And then we talked about building. So the CI system will pull the latest code, install the necessary dependencies, and then build your Flutter app. We talked about automated testing. So your CI system runs automated tests that will verify the quality and functionality of your code, right? And then test reports that will help you to know what went wrong while it was not able to build your application, okay? And then, of course, code quality checks and notifications. So these are a few things, right? Code quality checks has to do with more like additional checks to your code, like code formatting, linting, and some analysis that checks the quality of your code, okay? And of course, notifications that will notify the developer when the build status, and test results. And that actually helps to facilitate a quick feedback and issue resolution. So that's actually for CI, right? Now, CD, continuous development, focuses on automating the application's deployment to production or staging environments after successful integration and testing. That's either okay with deploying to production or maybe a staging environment, maybe just a dev site or something, right? So it basically just involves packaging the application for your Flutter projects, generating release artifacts like the APK or I think IPA files, right? And then deploying them to the target platforms or servers, right? So do you want to automatically deploy to, Play Store and the likes, okay, or whatever environment or server. or platform. So the CD pipeline involves things like artifact generation. So once your CI pipeline, is complete and all the build passes all tests, the application is packaged and release artifacts are generated, right? So there's also another process which is distribution. So that's generated artifacts like your APK files for Android and IPA files for iOS are now distributed to the appropriate distribution channels, right? Which could be app stores, your app store for Apple and your Google Play Store, or maybe staging, whatever staging servers you want, okay? And of course, another process is the deployment automation. So the deployment process, you can actually automate it. And that will just ensure that the new version of the application is seamlessly deployed to the target environment. You can also have what we call post-deployment task. Like maybe it could be additional actions like database migrations, cache warming, even restarting your server. You can actually perform that after you have, what's deployed. Okay, so that's actually that. So let's look at some tools, right? We can use to actually, get to do this whole CI/CD thing, right? So we have GitHub Actions, we have Jenkins, you have Circle CI, you have GitLab CI/CD, you have Travis AI, you have AWS Code Pipeline, you have Bamboo, you have Code Magic. Like I'm sure you must have heard or maybe even used some of these things, right? Especially the ones that are mostly common, likes of GitHub Actions, Jenkins, Circle CI, even AWS Code Pipeline and the likes, GitLab also. So, but we're going to be making use of GitHub Actions, right? We're going to be making use of GitHub Actions in this class. Okay, so GitHub Actions is a CI/CD platform, right? So it allows you to automate your build, automate your tests, and automate your deployment pipeline. So you can create what we call workflows, right? That will build and test every pull request to your repository, or even deploy pull requests that has been meshed, deployed to production. Okay, so it goes now. I don't know if you've heard about DevOps, right? But GitHub Actions goes beyond DevOps, right? DevOps is, just two words: development and operations come together to, kind of make building of solutions faster, right? So it lets you, GitHub Actions is beyond that because it lets you run workflows when other events, are happening in your repository. So for example, you can run a workflow, right, to let's say automatically add a label whenever somebody creates a new issue in your repository, right? So yeah, that's that. So GitHub, right, actually it provides virtual machines that you can run your workflows on: Linux, Windows, Mac OS, right? Or you can actually host your own self-hosted runners if you have your own cloud infrastructure or data center, right? If not, you can just leverage on what GitHub provides to run your workflow. So yeah, so we'll look at the components of GitHub Actions. So this is basically just kind of a pictorial representation, right? So the thing is, you can configure a GitHub Actions workflow to be triggered when an event occurs. So when an event occurs, something should happen, right? When an event occurs, right, in your repository, an event could be a pull request being opened or an issue being created. So your workflow can contain one or more jobs. We'll talk about what each of these things are. Your workflow can contain one or more jobs that can run in sequential order or in parallel, right? So each job will run inside its own virtual machine or what's called a runner, okay, or inside a container. And it actually has one or more steps that either will run a script or we define define or run an action. So you can see you can run an action, or you run a script. So each job has different steps, right? So let's look at um, some of these components one by one, right? So first of all is workflows, right? So what is a workflow? A workflow is basically a configurable automated process that will run one or more jobs. It's an automated process, but it's configurable. That's why I say it's a configurable automated process that will run one or more jobs. And they're actually defined in what we call a YAML file, YAML, right? That is checked into your repository. So, and it will run when it is triggered by an event, like I've said earlier in your repository, or you can trigger them manually, right? Or even schedule schedule it actually. So workflows are defined in our .github file. So we just create a .github/workflows directory in our repository, right? You can create that locally and push, right? And then you can have multiple workflows, but each of them, they can actually perform different tasks. So you can have multiple workflows that performs different tasks. For example, you can have one workflow to build and test pull requests. You can have another workflow to deploy your application every time a release APK is created. And you can even still have another workflow that will just create a label whenever somebody creates and opens an issue, right? Maybe label could be to do, um, in progress, something like that, okay? So that's basically what a workflow is. Now, we have events. So an event is just a specific activity in a repository that is triggered, that triggers a workflow run. For example, an activity, can originate, let's say someone creates a pull request, right? Or opens an issue or pushes a commit to a repository. That's an activity, right? So that can trigger an so that's what I trigger an event. So an event is just a specific activity that will now trigger a workflow. So you can actually configure your workflow to run when a specific activity on GitHub happens, even at a scheduled time, or maybe when an event outside of GitHub happens. It's Everything is just configurable, right? And you do this once and it just kind of, it's automated. Yes, so jobs. So jobs is just a set of steps, like you saw in the image before now. So job is just a set of steps in a workflow that is executed on the same runner. So each step is either, it could be a shell script, right, that will be executed, or an action that will be run. And yeah, so it could be either of those things. And of course, your steps are executed in order, and they are dependent on each other. So since each step is executed on the same runner, you can actually even share data from one step to another. For example, you can have a step that will build your APK, followed by a step that tests the application that was built. So just step by step, okay? So yeah, your jobs actually can also run in parallel, right? There's jobs that have no dependencies. You can configure a job, with no other job, like it doesn't have a dependency. So that means it can run in parallel, okay? But yeah, that's basically that. For example, you can have multiple build jobs for different architectures that they don't have any dependency, like um and then you can actually just have a job that does packaging, right? You can have build jobs. So build jobs they will actually run in parallel. And then when they are completed, packaging job can now run. Okay, so that's just, that's just that about jobs. So we have actions, and then we have runner. So a runner is basically it's just a server. Okay. So hold on, let's see. Yeah. So A runner is just a server, right, that runs your workflow when when it is being triggered. Okay, so it could be Linux, right? The server, GitHub actually provides Ubuntu, Linux, Microsoft Windows, Mac OS, right, runners to run your workflow. So each workflow run executes in a fresh, newly provisioned virtual machine, right? So that's that. So let's look at what a workflow looks like. So this is an example of a workflow, and this with respect to Flutter, right? There's what we call linting, right? It's just a way to check certain uh, rules, that certain rules are not broken, right? Maybe something has to be the naming convention, or having unnecessary imports that are not being used, or print statements and the likes. So this is an example of a workflow, right? And I'm going to talk about them, right, one by one. So first of all, the first thing here we have is the name. So name here is the name of the workflow. So you have to use something descriptive, right, that tells us what the workflow does. So this is Flutter linting. So this particular workflow is to check what linting in our code. Okay. Then we have the on. So this on, what it does is that it specifies the events that will trigger the workflow, right? It specifies the event that will trigger this workflow. So here we have two events. The first one is what? Push. You have this push, and then the branches, you have master main. So what this means is that the workflow will be triggered when code is pushed to either the main master or the main branch. This also means here that the workflow will be triggered when there's a pull request that is being made to the master or the main branch. Okay. Then we have jobs. So here, of course, we've talked about jobs. So it basically defines the jobs that will be run in the workflow. And like we said, each job is just a collection of steps, right? It's just a collection of steps. So under job, we have an ID called lint. So this lint here is the ID of the job. So you can have multiple jobs, and each of them will have their own ID. So you can notice indentation is very important. Okay. So yeah, so this is the ID of this particular job that is going to be run. Okay. So now after we have given it an ID, we now have to decide what server where we're going to run it. So you can say runs on, and we choose Ubuntu latest, because we want to get the latest, which is basically a Linux environment, right? So this is just to specify the operating system that the job was run on. Of course, we use Ubuntu latest. Now comes the steps, right? Which is just a series of steps that will be executed as part of the job. So look at the first step. So you can see that each step has a name and then a uses. So the name here is checkout code, right? So it just describes the name of the step. So it's a descriptive name also. So the first thing is want to do a checkout. We want to check out the code. So what do we use to do that checkout? That is where we have these actions slash checkout at v2. So this basically is actually a pre-built action that GitHub provides. Okay. And what it does is that it will check out the repository code so that subsequent steps can access it. So just like you do your Git checkout, you go to a branch, check this out. So you check out dev branch, check out main branch, and the likes. Okay. So it's a pre-built action, pre-built, right? It's already, GitHub actually provides this, so you don't have to break your head. So it just checks out the code so that you can run other steps. So after checking out the code, what's the next step, right? Next step is to set up Flutter, right? So we're using a descriptive name, set up Flutter. And what is it going to use to set up this Flutter, right? So we have this supposito slash Flutter action slash v2. This is also a pre-built action for setting up Flutter. So it's something you can just use. You don't need to do that. And here we are stating that we should use the latest what version, right? So this width is just, think of it like a it's just specific, it's like an input parameter, right? It's like an input. So think of when you're creating a function and then you say, okay, fine, this function should take in some parameters for it to work, right? So the width there specifies input parameters for the action. So here we're saying Flutter what version and we're passing what latest. So this parameter will tell this action to install the latest version of Flutter. Okay, so it's tell you to install the latest version of Flutter. And then we have another step. So what have we done so far? We have checked out the code. So we have set up Flutter, right? And then the next is to what? Install dependencies, because of course you have a lot of dependencies you probably are using, right? You could be using, we have the get dependency, we have a lot of other dependencies that you're probably using. So we have install dependencies, and then we want it to run. So now we use the word run. Okay, we use the word run. So we are saying, you know what, run this what code, Flutter pub what get, which you know this because you've used this before, right? So what will you do? It will get the dependencies. That's what it's going to do. So it's going to get dependencies, and then one more step. So after you've gotten the dependencies, right, you now basically have everything you need, right? So the next thing is to now run a linting test. Okay, that's the next thing to do. To now actually what run a linting what test. So how do we do that? So let's see. Let's see if we can actually do a what's it called? A test run of this. So I'm going to just create let me just bring up a project here, and you know, see if we can just do some setup. Okay, so let's see how to do this. So I have this, I'm trying to look for something that I have on GitHub. So let me check if I have this let me be sure I have this on GitHub. I do, but let me confirm. Let me just check my GitHub quickly so that we actually test this properly. Okay, so so this to do, that's the name. Okay, let me check because I want that so that we'll get to actually see its work. I don't think. Let me be sure. Let me see. Git remote. Okay, so it's okay. It's called noted. Okay, 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 okay. Um, noted. Okay, okay. I've seen that. Okay, okay, that's fine. Okay, so we have it. We have this already. So okay. So interestingly, I have. Let me do a Git status. Okay, so we have some changes here. So that's actually even fine. So it's good. So we have something to actually do. So what do we do when we want to do a test? Now, I want to do a bit of GitHub Actions, a bit of CI/CD here. Um, so let's see. So we need to create a workflow file, right? We need to create a workflow file, and that is going to help us to this it. So let's see. Now there are two ways you can do this. You can actually do this from your GitHub, right? You can actually create it automatically from your GitHub if you want to, or you can just what's it called? Create it locally. So, which one do I actually? Which one do we even do? Should we create it from GitHub or uh which? Okay, so let's create it from here. So I'm going to create a folder. So you have to click here so you don't create it inside. So I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call it dot GitHub. Wait, hold on. Let me just. Okay, no, sorry. Let me. Um, oh, okay. Now inside my .github, I'm going to create another folder called workflows. So every workflow that we're going to actually need, right? I'm going to create a workflow here. Now, so let's create one workflow, right? Which is basically what I showed you, right, in the slide. But let's just do it. So that workflow basically is just for LinkedIn. There are a lot of things you can actually create a workflow for, but just for the purpose of learning. So I'm going to create, I'm going to call it LinkedIn. Let's say LinkedIn check dot. So remember, it's going to be a YAML file, right? So let's now write those things you saw. So let's actually write it. Okay, let's just write it actually. So first of all, we need a name, right? And the name is going to be LinkedIn check. Um, so you can say it says it's missing a property on. So and it can't actually wait. So what should trigger this work, right? What should actually trigger this workflow? So I would say on. Now this is YAML, so it has you need to it has a syntax, so indentation is very important. So on push, I want to do two on push and then on pull request. So you can see there's a lot. There's on pull request review, or when there's a pull request review comments, like there's a lot of things that you can use to trigger your workflow. Okay. So on pull and on pull request, now I can now specify the branch. So let me say branches rather. So for branches, I think I just want to use what's it called? We have main. So let me just use main, right? So that's what's on. So if of course it's still telling us, okay, it doesn't have jobs, doesn't really have jobs. You're giving me name, you've told me what should trigger me, but give me jobs, give me what to do. So let's do that so that to stop shouting and crying like a baby. Okay, so jobs. Okay, so what are the jobs? So remember, after the jobs, each job should have an ID. You can have multiple jobs. So each job should have an ID. So I'm going to call this lint, right? And then what should it run on? So it runs on Ubuntu latest. Okay. Now, what are the steps? So you need to pay attention to indentation. What are the steps? Okay. First step, the descriptive name for this step is checkout repository. And then what uses, so what does it use to check out? What action? So actions, the checkout at V2. So remember this pre-built, right? So that's one step. Okay, another step. Name, that was set up Flutter. And then uses so supposito. So I think Flutter action still at V2. Okay, right. So the next thing is what we need to install dependencies, right? We need to install dependencies. So I'm going to name install dependencies. And then, so in installing dependencies, it needs to run something. So what is it going to run? It's going to run the command flutter pub get, right? So that's actually that, right? There are a lot of things, right, that you can actually what do. But for now, let's just keep it simple. So name. So the last one, we want to, based on the fact we want to do linting check, right? We want to run what we call Flutter analyze. Okay. And then we say run. Now, how do you run Flutter? We use the command Flutter analyze, and that will actually run our linting for us, right? That will actually run our linting for us. So this is how to create a GitHub workflow, right? This is how to create a GitHub workflow. So yeah, so done. Let's just let me do a git status. Okay, and then so I'm going to add, let's just add everything. So git add dot, okay, so git commit. So we said on push, right? So git commit dash m. Let's just commit first. Commit message set up GitHub workflow for linting. Okay, so before we go there, so let me, sorry, I'm going to, duplicate my screen, right? So that we can actually see, these. So, okay, so here, this is noted. So let me refresh this. We had just one commit 2 weeks ago. Okay. Um, okay. So I think this is it. I hope so. Okay, so let's push. Git push. We can just do that shoe origin main. So let's push that. Okay. So, and I'm going to just refresh this. I hope this is so we have to, okay, this is it. So you can see we have two commits now. So I'm going to go to, so you can see this setup, you can see this orange sign here. So I'm going to go to actions, right? So you can see this action is running. So these are GitHub actions. I'm going to click on it. And then, so you see everything. So I'll click on this again. So I want you to see how it runs. So you can see, what does it do? It sets up job, checkout repository is done. Now it is running setup Flutter, right? So it's running setup Flutter to run the code, which is this supposito that has already done the checkout repository. So you can actually open it up to see, everything. So the next thing is what we told you to do, install dependencies, right? Install dependencies. I hope I made some, I think there should be some, I hope there are some linting problems in this. If they are not, it will pass. And I wanted it to fail. So you can see it ran Flutter analyze noted, no issues found, right? So this, you can, so what happens is that every time this workflow will keep what running, right? Which will help us to know to help us to just make sure our code is actually what's performing well and doing as it should be. So let me break some linting rules on this code. So let's see. Let me see. Okay, something like this. And what else? What else? What else? Trying to what else? How else can I break this? Let me see. Uh hmm. Okay, let me break another one. Where do I have a function here? Print um print to do list, right? Let me see what I have to do. Okay. So let me say print the try correcting the name. Okay, capital letter D. Don't need to print a particular this. Okay. So of course you shouldn't use print statements. You can see this, don't invoke print in code production, right? So you can see we have two problems here. Okay, so let me just ignore it, right? I'm going to go back to code. So let's do a git status to be sorry, git status. Okay, so git add, git commit, commit message should be add linting issues, and then push back to main. So let's see that. Okay, so once I refresh this, right? So you can see this orange sign again shows that an action is running, a workflow. So you can see it here, add linting issues. So I'm going to click on it, which was the name of that commit. So I'll click on this so that I can see more. Okay, so it has set up job, it has checked out the repository, so it will run setup Flutter, right? So to set Flutter up, and yeah, so that's basically that. So let's just wait for it. So let's be sure that these errors, these linting rules that I broke, let's see if it will catch it. Okay. Yeah, I think it should. Printing is a linting stuff. Though you can add your own what's it called? Um your own customized linting rules though. So but we're just using the default. So you can see run Flutter analyze. So this gives us two issues, right? And it goes as far as even pointing you. So you can see it tells me here, don't invoke print in production code. In my lib folder, down to my home page dart line 29, right? Which is here, line 29, which is this. And this is when you come to problems here, you can see it's almost the same thing. So line 29 colon 7, you can see don't invoke. Second one is what constructors in this at immediately should be declared as what const, right? Which is exactly what we have here, right? So now with this, okay, when I come back to the code, right? So you can actually see that this particular what commit or this particular push has what issues. Okay, so this will now prompt you to know that, oh, okay, something is wrong somewhere. In your mind, you've written an amazing code. You have pushed it. It is working. In fact, you ran it on your application. It's doing fantastic. But have you written a very good code? Right? Have you written a very good code? So that's so these are the things. And of course, you notice all you had to do was what push, and it did it automatically for you. You didn't have to do a test. So imagine if you were given a code base, right, that doesn't actually have the tests, and you know that you need to do some of these things. Just setting up a workflow, pushing something, right, it will just show you all the linting issues, right? And in fact, it's not just about linting. You can actually write workflows for anything. You can write workflows that will automatically build a release APK that will automatically push it to Play Store, push it to App Store, or do whatever you actually want it to do. Okay, so uh, that's just like an introduction, right, into CI/CD in Flutter, right? So we're going to apply this knowledge, right, in every of our work we're going to be doing, every application we're going to be working on moving forward, both in your capstone project, right? I've already taught you how to write tests, right? We've looked at testing. So we'll also incorporate testing into our workflows, right? So that our tests will automatically also just run on site, because you don't need to have Remember, you can be working with 5, 6, 10, 20 developers on a project, right? You need to be able to test functionalities. You need to be able to test stuff. You need to be able to test your widgets. You can do unit testing, widget testing, and the likes. Okay. So this is where we're going to just round up. So if there are questions, I'll take them quickly and then we call it a day. So questions, please.
Okay,
Okay,
sorry. Oh, go ahead, Collins.
Okay, Collins, go
no, no,
ahead.
no. I
Let's
don't
start.
have a question. I wanted to.
Okay, hold on.
No, I
David,
don't have a
yeah, go
question.
ahead. Oh, some of you don't have a question. Okay,
Okay.
yeah,
No, I
wait.
have a question. No. I have a
David, go
question.
first.
So there's this
Okay, go ahead.
the workflow that when you push to it, like when you make a new push to that repo, and it sends an email to your phone that a new updated version of that application you are building has been pushed. You should check it out or something. Can we also do that with this?
Sorry, come again.
Okay, so like there's a application, sorry, that I'm building that if you push to it, like if you push to the repo, the repository, then it sends an email to everybody that is on that repo that a new version of that application has been pushed. Like you check it out.
Okay. So you're
I don't
asking
know.
if it is doable.
Yes, yes.
Yes, it is now. It actually is.
Okay.
So there are some actions to send email actually. So one of the places you actually have to go to is you just maybe you can check this out. Let me drop it on the chat, or maybe I'll drop it. Let me drop it on the Discord. I'll drop it on the Discord so that I'll drop it here. Maybe one of you can drop it on there. 'Cause I don't want to switch. So GitHub Marketplace, that's where you can see a lot of actions you can play around with, right? So for example, this particular one will help you to send email. So these are an email GitHub action to send email. So the action will just simply send email to multiple recipients. So you have to decide what should trigger this sending of mail. Remember, everything is just all about what trigger, right? So what triggers this workflow? So you can actually just test it out and then set it up yourself. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So just check the link.
Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Collins.
Okay. The my network got the better of me, so like I missed like huge chunks of the lesson. So I'm wondering when will the video be up on YouTube?
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that today. I'll do that today. I'll make sure to do
Oh,
that today.
all right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you very much for your time. And if there are no other questions, I think this is where we'll call it a day. So next week, we're getting into week 8. There's going to be a promotional task for you. And of course, as you know, it will involve CI/CD and it will also involve testing. So you may have to go and brush up, what we learned about unit testing. You've learned how to test functions, how to test view models, repositories, how you can test classes and the likes, right? So that task will take you a step back into testing and also incorporate workflows. So basically, we're going to learn some, a bit of, you know, intermediate advanced stuff. It's not all about building UIs. I can sit down and say, okay, you know what, let's build a full app from scratch, right? But sometimes it's not all about that. You're setting extra knowledge that you need because you are not beginners. Because if, as far as UI is concerned, you can just anybody can learn how to do a UI, but how many persons can learn how to write good codes and follow best practices? So that's one of the major things you will get from KodeCamp 4.0. So thank you very much, guys, and let's have a wonderful day.